Good morning, everybody. Can we hear well at the back? Perfect. Merci. Au nom du Conseil d'administration du Conseil des Églises pour la justice et la criminologie du Canada, comme président sortant, il me fait plaisir de vous souhaiter la plus cordiale des bienvenues. Ça ne durera pas une demi-heure. I won't keep you half an hour in French, don't worry. But as our Church Council on Justice and Correction is bilingual, we always have few words, at least in French. So I'm coming from Quebec. I'm the past president of CCJC, and it's a pleasure to have this event today with you all. And I want to thank our staff in Ottawa, Skylar and Catherine, to be the soul of this event. So enjoy it, and we will have a very, very good morning. Alors, merci d'être avec nous et passez une bonne avant-midi avec nous. Je cède maintenant la parole à Stephen.
Thank you, Laurent. Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Siemens, and I have the joy of hosting today's event. I live near Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and so I thought the weather here would be a lot warmer than my weather over there. I came here wearing shorts, but I now wear pants, so that's how it works. I work for Mennonite Central Committee, for those of you who have heard of the work of MCC, as their restorative justice coordinator for MCC Canada, and I've been serving on the board of CCJC for just over 3 years. And like Laurent, I'm incredibly proud of the staff members who you'll hear from more today, and who have done a fantastic job orchestrating today's event. Equally, I'm thrilled by the special guests that we have here with us. Sadly, one of our presenters, Nicole Heidman, is unable to attend today's event since all flights were grounded due to a massive storm coming through the Tennessee area and surrounding states. So weather is bad elsewhere as well. We at CCJC thought it was fitting that during the National Victims of Crime Awareness Week, we should share our learnings about victim empathy with offenders. For that is locating empathy in an unlikely place, in unlikely people, but resonates well with the principles of restorative justice and the trajectory of CCJC's mission to serve as a shining light for restorative approaches to justice and corrections. Seeing through the bars also illustrates the strong element of empathy throughout the Christian story, which the CCJC, after 40+ years of existence, continues to seek to be faithful to. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, one of the most famous of Jesus' parables, we see clearly that empathy can come from an unlikely situation and in an unlikely person. Keep in mind, as you listen to what follows, it was axiomatic for Jesus' listeners to brand Samaritans as the ultimate other in their world, devoid of basic humanity. So reading from Luke's Gospel in the 10th chapter, reads like this. Just then a religious scholar stood up with a question to test Jesus. Teacher, what do I need to do to get eternal life? He answered, well, what's written in God's law? How do you interpret it? He said that you should love the Lord your God with all your passion and prayer and muscle and intelligence, and that you love your neighbor as well as you do yourself. Good answer, said Jesus. Do it, and you will live. Looking for a loophole, he asked, and just how would you define neighbor? Jesus answered by telling a story. There was a man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, and on the way he was attacked by robbers. They took his clothes, beat him up, and went off, leaving him half dead. Luckily, a priest was on his way down the same road, but when he saw him, he angled across to the other side. And then a Levite, religious man, showed up, and he also avoided the injured man. A Samaritan traveling the road came on him. When he saw the man's condition, his heart went out to him. He gave him first aid, disinfected and bandaged his wounds. And then he lifted him onto his donkey, led him to an inn, and made him comfortable. In the morning, he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take good care of him, and if it costs any money, put it on my bill, and I'll pay you on my way back." What do you think? Which of the 3 became a neighbor to the man attacked by robbers? Asked Jesus. "Well, the one who treated him kindly," the religious scholar responded. And Jesus said, "Go and do the same." I would suggest, friends, that the scandal in the parable is that not only can empathy be found in an unlikely place and in an unlikely person, but that the category of neighbor is boundless, permeable, and extending far past the other and the outsider. Our calling is to love our neighbor, which is anyone and everyone, without any wiggle room, without any loopholes. Jesus made it clear that neighbor means anyone and everyone. There are no exceptions, including those we want to write off or the ones society wants to write off or put in the category of otherness. So that is one zoomed-in look at the biblical imperative that calls the church councils to pay attention to empathy. And standing further back, zooming out of this parable, the Christian story itself hinges on empathy. God coming in Christ was victim empathy work with offenders as well, indeed with humanity. As L. Ann Jervis says it, the New Testament believes that God is an empathetic God, that God's empathy extends beyond the capacity to understand human experience to actively entering into human existence. The New Testament presents Jesus as a supreme example of empathy, as one who fully understands both the experience of God and the experience of humanity. And St. Paul challenges followers of Jesus to empathize fully with Jesus' faith and his death and hope for resurrection. So ultimately, CCJC is interested in nurturing empathy because God, in sending Jesus, has and does so with humanity. Our motivation compels us to get behind providing opportunities for victim empathy and drawing it out in places and people whose society would rather not entertain, such as federal offenders. So with that in mind, I trust you will be able to fully take in Seeing Through the Bars this morning. We will hear from our 3 panelists, and then we will move into a Q&A later on. And I see that Rebecca is here as well, and so we'll invite you down for a welcome as well from Rebecca.
Hello and welcome, and I'm glad to see so many people here this morning. Thank you to Stephen, to Skylar, to Catherine, to everyone who has, Laurent, everyone who's been involved in making this morning's presentations possible. I was asked to talk for a moment about the relevance of why this type of program, why a space is open in the law school for this type of program. And I can't speak on behalf of the law school. I teach here. I also work as a staff lawyer elsewhere. So I wear a number of different hats, and one of them that I wear is as a board member and treasurer with the CCJC. So if you want to donate money, that's a side note. Always welcome. But I wanted to say, in terms of what's the connecting point, I'm not a religious leader. I'm a lay person. I have no special religious credentials. I'm an academic and a lawyer. But I think for me, the connecting point is actually in Immanuel Kant and his second formulation of the categorical imperative, which is foundational to liberalism and foundational also to, he was a religious man himself, a Christian man, the idea that human beings are not replaceable, they're not objects, and they are ends in themselves. And I think that's a connecting point with empathy always, that any person, whatever they have done, continues to be an end in themselves. And that is, as I said, is foundational to my own PhD research. It's foundational to my understanding of the law. And it's also foundational to the Charter of Rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations, whatever theological or secular background you come from. So, yes, we belong here. And this conversation is important. And I thank you all for being here, and I look forward to listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca. Well, first we'll hear from Catherine Bliss, CCJC's Education and Community Engagement Manager. Catherine.
So of you have probably already noticed and perhaps heard our main speaker, Nicole Heidman, was not able to make it due to weather. So what she was kind enough to do is send along a few points. So I'm going to try and summarize a few things that she wanted to try and share with you guys. Unfortunately, we miss out on some of the dynamic kind of things that could have happened with the Q&A, but hopefully I'll be able to pass on a little bit of information to sort of give you guys some ideas of really where a lot of these ideas that we're talking about have come from, since the victim impact curriculum that we'll be discussing today, really the one that we're using comes from them. So it's one that they've developed, and so it's kind of interesting to get a little bit of context about where it came from before we start discussing how how it's sort of grown in Canada. So Nicole works for an organization based out of Nashville, Tennessee, called You Have the Power. It is, generally their mission is to educate, advocate, and empower people in communities who are impacted by violent crime. So they were founded in 1993 by actually a former First Lady of Tennessee, Andrea Conte. It was a grassroots movement from the start. It was kind of, the idea was to bring together people whose lives had been touched by violent crimes, and to determine what could be done to address these crimes and their consequences. So it's very much like a grassroots kind of victim advocacy type organization based in the States. And as their mission sort of states, a lot of what they do is education, so they create resources. If you go on their website, you'll see they have a number of free resources on a variety of different topics. One of the things that they have available is this victim impact curriculum that they developed. So that's sort of where they've sort of crossed paths with us and things like that. So, so now I'm going to go through a little bit. I'm really not going to try and give a talk Nicole gave, because I don't think that's going to be as interesting for you guys. So what I will do is provide a brief context to the curriculum itself, and a little bit of some of the learnings that Nicole wanted to share with you. So Nicole sort of wanted to give a bit of an overview on the idea of a victim and how it sort of became more present in the criminal justice system. So the word victim was never really part of the justice system until the late 60s. And she highlights the first victim impact statement that was given during the infamous Charles Manson trial. Sharon Tate was a victim of Charles Manson, and her mother gave the first statement before he was sentenced. And it was sort of, this was seen by some people as one of the precipitating things that launched the victims' rights movement in the 60s, and sort of allowed the idea of victim to become more present in the criminal justice system. Victim impact programs, so the curriculum type things that we'll be discussing today, began in the US in 1984, and the first curriculum was actually developed by the Federal Office of Victims of Crime in 1984. So if you I know like in our research we've looked a little bit, there are a few different curriculums that are available in the States. You can some are available for free, there's some for purchase. So they've been around for a little while, like 84. You Have the Power, however, they developed their curriculum. Their first curriculum was developed in 2006. However, the curriculum that we're using now, it has been modified from that original one. The original one, she sort of says, was a bit more basic, and it was much more of like student-teacher dynamic. So in their revision in 2012, it was sort of coincided with Nicole coming on as a staff person at You Have the Power, and she had an extensive background in this type of work. So she had experience delivering victim impact courses, writing curriculum. So she really took it on as a project to relook at the curriculum and try and make it a little bit more interactive and dynamic. So they, I think maybe it's around that time that they started to integrate a lot of the other resources and videos they have in their sort of their toolbox. So in 2012, they actually did a bit of consultation. So it was Nicole in consultation with their founder, Andrea Conte, and a number of clinical personnel and other professionals in the field. That's where they really took a look at the curriculum, revised it, and have come to produce the one that they now have available on their website, and the one that we've used. So since we'll be talking about it, I'll give a very brief, for those of you who don't know what it is, just so you understand, like, what does a victim impact curriculum look like. It's actually a physical book that comes along with a number of movies and DVDs and things like that that have little stories of people's involvement in as victims. So each chapter will focus on a crime and the impacts that the victim suffers as a result of that crime. So whether that's physical, physically, financially, emotionally, and spiritually. There are interactive activities, so it's kind of got a workbook style as well. So when the course is delivered, it's not just somebody at the front teaching. There's things that they can do sort of in between sessions and things like that to make it a bit more of a dynamic learning situation. In the States, Nicole is a trainer for the program, so she will go around and train people who are interested in providing the program in prisons how to deliver the program. So that's a service that they offer. And they also, she highlighted that in some cases, they always hope to have like an actual victim participate in the course. So a victim would come in and sort of in their own words describe their experiences to sort of give a very direct connection and perspective to the people taking the course. So she also provided me with a few of what she considers to be like their best practices of how they would run the course. So someone has this curriculum, you know, they become familiar with it. How does it actually work in terms of a class? So in the States, a lot of times it's, whether it's a Department of Corrections, it's a mandated program, or if it's just a particular institution that takes it on, or something like that. They try and keep it a very small class size. So ideally, according to Nicole, it would be, say, no more than 20 participants at a time. The idea is that you would want to keep the numbers low to create a nice, intimate environment where people are comfortable enough to share. So you'll hear from our other panelists a little bit more in this area, but a lot of the issues that can come up in this are quite deep and quite, it can stir up a lot of emotion in people, and you want to make sure you've created an environment where people are comfortable talking. And so that's a big reason why they keep the class sizes small. She also suggests that having participants be of different criminal backgrounds makes for a very good and dynamic class. She said, for example, you would not want to have a class full of only sex offenders, in that you're going to kind of have people reinforcing perhaps similar ideals. So you want to have a good range because you really want to have an open discussion. So the class goes over a course of 12 weeks. In most cases, people will drop out, they get transferred. So if you start with about 20 people, you can often anticipate ending up with between 10 and 15 people actually sort of completing the course at the end. I think that pretty much sums up the majority of what, and I really abbreviated this because I think the most impact is going to be the people who have experience with the program, and I think those are the people that you guys have come to hear. But we also wanted to give some presence to You Have the Power, in the sense that this is really their curriculum, and this is where we're learning from them in that sense. And I mean, they've created this program from people who are committed to making a difference. And I think it's really important to understand where that's come from, because I think it speaks a lot about sort of the effect that it can have. I wanted to read one thing that I saw that she had written down as like a testimonial from someone who's taken the program, and I'll leave you with that. So this was, I guess maybe through a feedback and evaluation that someone who'd participated in one of the programs had noted. This is a very important class because you get to see crime through the eyes of the victim. The hurt and disruption that they constantly deal with because of someone else. I see how my decision-making affects other people's lives. This class makes the pain feel real. I wasn't raised to hurt people like this, and I'm not going to continue to do so. This class has played a major role in my desire to change. So